The icy wind sliced through Zara Vaughn's threadbare coat like 1,000 frozen knives, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die on this God-forsaken mountain pass in the winter of 1884. She had been traveling alone from Salt Lake City to St. George, Utah, a journey that should have taken 5 days under normal circumstances. But the unexpected January blizzard had turned the route through the mountains into a death trap. Her horse had thrown a shoe 2 miles back, forcing her to lead the limping animal through knee-deep snow while her fingers turned blue and her teeth chattered so violently she thought they might crack. The light was fading fast, and with it, any hope of finding shelter before nightfall would claim her completely. Zara had left Salt Lake City with high hopes and a leather satchel containing everything she owned in the world. At 22 years old, she had secured a position as a schoolteacher in St. George, a small but growing settlement in the southwestern corner of Utah Territory. The job represented freedom from her aunt's suffocating household, where she had lived since her parents died of cholera when she was 16. Her aunt had made it abundantly clear that Zara was a burden, an extra mouth to feed with no prospects for marriage, and no useful skills beyond reading and writing. When the letter arrived offering her the teaching position, Zara had packed her belongings that very night and purchased a ticket on the next stagecoach heading south. But the stagecoach had broken an axle outside of Nephi, and rather than wait 3 days for repairs, Zara had used the last of her money to buy the horse and supplies to continue on her own. The weather had been cold but clear when she set out. The blizzard had descended without warning the previous afternoon, transforming the familiar trail into an alien landscape of white. Now, as darkness crept across the snow-covered peaks, Zara stumbled forward on legs that no longer felt like her own. Her skirts were frozen stiff, making each step a battle. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, and she had long since lost feeling in her toes. The horse whinnied pitifully behind her, pulling against the reins. She could barely see 10 feet ahead through the swirling snow. Every breath burned her lungs. She had stopped shivering an hour ago, which she knew from her father's old medical books was a very bad sign. Her father had been a doctor before the cholera took him, and she remembered him explaining that when the body stopped shivering, it meant the core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Sleepiness would come next, then confusion, then death. Already her thoughts were becoming sluggish, her movements uncoordinated. Zara thought about simply lying down in the snow. It would be so easy to close her eyes and let the cold take her. At least it would stop hurting. At least she would stop feeling so terribly, terribly tired. Her knees buckled and she fell forward into a snowbank, too exhausted to rise. The horse stood over her, steam rising from its nostrils, but Zara could not find the strength to pull herself up. This was it then. She would die here, and no one would find her body until spring. Her aunt would probably say she had it coming for being too independent, too headstrong, too unwilling to accept her proper place. She closed her eyes and felt the darkness pulling her down. Then she heard a voice, deep and rough-edged, cutting through the howling wind. "Hold on there. Do not you dare give up now." Strong hands gripped her shoulders and turned her over. Through the veil of snow, Zara saw a face above her, partially obscured by a thick scarf and a wide-brimmed hat crusted with ice. The man's eyes were the color of warm honey, intense and focused entirely on her. He pulled the scarf down, revealing a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Zara tried to respond, but her lips would not move properly. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a whimper and a sob. All right, I have got you," the man said, his voice gentler now. "My name is Colton Adams, and I swear on everything holy that I am not going to let you freeze to death on this mountain. Do you understand me?" She managed the smallest nod. Colton moved with swift efficiency, pulling off his own heavy coat and wrapping it around her despite her feeble protests. The coat was warm from his body heat and smelled of leather, wood smoke, and something indefinably masculine. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Through her confused haze, Zara registered that he was tall and powerfully built, moving through the deep snow without apparent difficulty. "There is a lined shack about half a mile from here," he said, more to himself than to her. "We will make it. We have to make it." He carried her through the blizzard while leading both her horse and his own sturdy bay gelding. Zara drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of his footsteps and the warmth of his body. She wanted to tell him to leave her, that she was not worth saving, that he was risking his own life for a stranger. But the words would not come, and part of her was fiercely, desperately grateful that he had found her. After what seemed like both an eternity and no time at all, Colton kicked open a wooden door and carried her into a small, dark structure. He set her down carefully near what looked like a crude fireplace, then immediately set about starting a fire. His movements were practiced and sure. Within minutes, flames crackled to life, casting dancing shadows on the rough wooden walls. The lined shack was barely more than a crude shelter, maybe 12 feet square, with gaps between the logs where the chinking had fallen out. But it had a roof, and a door that closed against the wind, and a fireplace that was already beginning to push back the deadly cold. Colton secured both horses in a small lean-to attached to the side of the shack, giving them what grain he had in his saddlebags and rubbing them down with handfuls of straw. When he came back inside, his face was grim. He knelt beside Zara, who was still shaking uncontrollably despite the fire. "All right, listen to me," he said, his honey-colored eyes holding hers. "You are suffering from severe exposure. Your clothes are frozen solid and we need to get you out of them immediately. I know this is improper, and I know you do not know me from Adam, but if we do not get you warm right now, you are going to die. Do you understand?" Zara's mind was clearing slightly with the heat from the fire, enough for mortification to set in. But she could see the seriousness in his expression and knew he was right. She tried to reach for the buttons on her coat, but her fingers would not cooperate. "I cannot feel my hands," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I know," Colton said gently. "I am going to help you, but I promise you I will be a gentleman about it. I have 2 younger sisters back home in Wyoming, and I would hope someone would do the same for them in this situation." He worked quickly and efficiently, helping her out of her frozen coat, her soggy wool dress, her multiple petticoats that had become stiff with ice. He kept his eyes averted as much as possible, wrapping her in dry blankets from his bedroll the moment each piece of clothing came off. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, there was nothing salacious about his touch. His hands were careful and respectful, treating her with the same gentle firmness one might use with an injured animal. When she was wrapped in blankets, he turned his attention to her feet. Her boots were frozen solid and he had to use his knife to cut the laces. When he finally got them off along with her stockings, he sucked in a sharp breath. "How bad?" Zara managed to ask, though she was afraid of the answer. "Your toes are white," Colton said honestly. "But I do not think there is frostbite yet. We need to warm them gradually." He pulled off his own boots and socks, then did something that shocked her. He opened his shirt and pulled her bare feet against his stomach, holding them there despite what must have been considerable discomfort. "What are you doing?" Zara gasped. "Warming you," he said simply. Body heat is the fastest way to bring your temperature back up safely. The fire will help, but it is not enough on its own. He held her feet against his bare skin, and gradually, agonizingly, feeling began to return to them. It hurt worse than anything Zara had ever experienced, a burning, stabbing pain that made her cry out. Colton held her steady, murmuring reassurances. "I know it hurts. I know, but that is a good sign. It means the tissue is not dead. Just breathe through it. You are doing fine." Tears streamed down Zara's face from the pain, but also from relief, and from the overwhelming kindness of this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to save her life. When the worst of the pain subsided, leaving her feet red and tender but definitely alive, Colton carefully wrapped them in dry cloth and then set about making coffee and heating up some beans and salt pork he had in his saddlebags. "What is your name?" he asked as he worked. "Zara Vaughn," she replied, her voice stronger now. "I am traveling to St. George to take a position as a school teacher." "In this weather?" Colton glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "The weather was fine when I started," Zara said defensively. "The blizzard came up suddenly." "It did at that," Colton agreed. He handed her a tin cup of hot coffee and she wrapped her hands around it, savoring the warmth. "I was caught out in it myself. I was herding cattle from Cedar City back to my ranch when it hit. Lost the herd in the storm but found you instead, so I reckon that is a fair trade." "You lost your cattle because of me." "I lost my cattle because of the blizzard," Colton corrected gently. "And cattle can be replaced. People cannot. Drink your coffee." Zara obeyed, feeling the hot liquid spread warmth through her chest. She studied Colton over the rim of the cup. In the firelight, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 25 or 26. His dark hair curled slightly at the ends where it touched his collar, and despite the stubble and the trail dust, there was something refined about his features. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, completely at home in this harsh environment. "You said you have sisters?" Zara asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to fill the silence. Colton nodded, stirring the beans. "Two. Emma is 19 and Margaret just turned 16. They are back in Laramie with my mother. My father died 3 years ago and I came down here to start fresh, build my own spread. Bought a small ranch about 10 miles south of here, near a town called Anderson's Creek. It is not much yet, just 100 head of cattle and a cabin that leaks when it rains, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice and Zara understood it. She felt the same way about her teaching position, modest as it was. It represented independence, a life built on her own terms. "I imagine your mother misses you," Zara said. "She does, but she understands. A man needs to make his own way in the world, and I go back to visit when I can, usually once a year." He divided the beans onto 2 tin plates and handed her one along with a spoon. "It is not fancy, but it will keep you alive." The food was simple but hot, and Zara devoured it with an appetite sharpened by her near-death experience. As she ate, she became increasingly aware of her state of undress beneath the blankets. Her clothes hung on a makeshift line near the fire, steaming as they dried. The situation was wildly improper. If anyone knew she had spent the night alone with a man in a lined shack, her reputation would be destroyed before she even reached St. George to begin her new position. But what choice did she have? The alternative was freezing to death in the snow. Colton seemed to sense her discomfort. "The storm should blow itself out by morning," he said. "Your clothes will be dry by then, and I will escort you to St. George to make sure you arrive safely. We can say, I found you on the trail and rode alongside for protection. No one needs to know about tonight." "Why would you lie for me?" Zara asked. "I am not lying," Colton said with a slight smile. I did find you on the trail, and I will ride alongside for protection. I am just omitting certain details that are nobody's business but ours." His eyes met hers across the fire, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that made Zara's breath catch. She looked away quickly, feeling her cheeks flush with heat that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved my life tonight." "You would have done the same for me," Colton replied. "I am not sure I would have had the strength to carry you through a blizzard," Zara pointed out. Colton laughed, a warm sound that filled the small space. "Fair point. But you would have tried, I think. There is steel in you, Miss Vaughn. I can see it in your eyes. You did not give up out there until your body gave out on you. That takes courage." No one had ever called Zara courageous before. Her aunt had called her stubborn, willful, difficult. But courage was different. Courage was something to be proud of. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I thought I was going to die." "Being brave does not mean you are not scared," Colton said. "It means you keep going even when you are." They finished their meal in companionable silence. And then Colton banked the fire and arranged his bedroll on one side of the small space, while Zara remained bundled in blankets on the other. The storm howled outside, rattling the door and sending fingers of cold air through the gaps in the walls, but inside the shack it was almost cozy. "I will keep the fire going through the night," Colton said. "Try to get some rest. You have been through an ordeal." Zara lay down, her body still aching from the cold, but she found sleep elusive. She was too aware of Colton's presence, the sound of his breathing, the rustle of his blankets when he shifted position. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face above her in the snow, felt his arms lifting her, heard his voice promising to warm every part of her. "I will warm every part of you," he had said, or something like it. And he had kept that promise, risking his own safety to save a complete stranger. Zara had never known a man like Colton Adams. The men in her aunt's social circle were pale, soft-handed clerks and businessmen who spoke in careful, measured tones and never said anything they truly meant. Colton was different. He was direct, honest, capable. He had seen her at her most vulnerable and treated her with nothing but respect and kindness. She thought about his hands holding her frozen feet against his bare skin, the casual intimacy of that gesture. It should have embarrassed her, should have felt wrong, but instead it had felt natural, necessary, right. "Miss Vaughn," Colton's voice came through the darkness. "Are you all right? You are breathing oddly." "I am fine," Zara said quickly. "Just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "About how strange it is that a few hours ago I did not know you existed, and now you have seen me without my clothes and held my feet against your stomach. My aunt would have a fit of the vapors." Colton chuckled softly. "I imagine she would. But your aunt was not here, and sometimes survival requires us to set aside society's rules." "Is that what you believe? That rules can be set aside when necessary?" "I believe that rules should serve people, not the other way around," Colton said. "And I believe that saving a life is more important than preserving propriety. Do not you?" "Yes," Zara said. "Yes, I do. Then we understand each other." Zara smiled in the darkness. They did understand each other in a way that surprised her. Despite having just met, despite the unusual circumstances, she felt a connection to this cowboy that she had never felt with anyone before. "Colton," she said tentatively. "Yes. What you said earlier about warming every part of me. Did you mean that?" There was a long pause, and Zara's heart began to pound. Had she been too forward, misread the situation? Then Colton spoke, his voice low and serious. "I meant it. I would not let you freeze, not out there in the snow and not here in this shack. As long as I am breathing, I will keep you warm and safe. That is my promise to you." The intensity in his voice made Zara shiver, but not from cold. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself and closed her eyes, and this time sleep came easily. She woke to pale morning light filtering through the gaps in the walls and the smell of coffee brewing. Colton was already up, fully dressed, tending the fire. Her clothes hung where he had left them, dry now though somewhat wrinkled. He heard her stirring and turned, a slight smile on his face. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" Zara took inventory of her body. Everything ached and her feet were still tender, but she was alive and warm. "Much better, thank you. Is the storm over?" "Passed about an hour ago. We have clear skies and about 2 feet of fresh snow. The trail will be slow going, but passable." He poured coffee and brought it to her. "I will step outside while you dress. Take your time." He pulled on his coat and went out, closing the door behind him. Zara dressed quickly, her fingers still slightly clumsy from the lingering effects of the cold. Her dress was wrinkled and bore water stains, but it was clean and dry. She did the best she could with her hair, braiding it and pinning it up, wishing for a mirror. When she opened the door, she found Colton had already saddled both horses and was checking her mount's hooves. The sun was brilliant on the fresh snow, nearly blinding. The world looked reborn, pristine and beautiful, with no sign of the deadly storm that had raged through the night. "Your horse's shoe is still loose," Colton said. "She will not be able to carry you far in this snow." "You will have to ride with me." Zara's eyes widened. "On your horse, together." "Unless you would rather walk," Colton said mildly. "I can lead your mare. She will be fine without a rider." The thought of riding pressed against Colton for hours made Zara's stomach flutter nervously, but she nodded. "That makes sense." Colton helped her mount, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. Zara was acutely aware of his chest against her back, the strength of his thighs bracketing hers, the warmth radiating from his body. She sat stiffly at first, trying to maintain some distance, but Colton's voice rumbled in her ear. "Relax, Miss Vaughn. It is a long ride to St. George, and you will be sore as hell if you sit like a board the whole way. Lean back against me. I will not bite." Hesitantly, Zara let herself settle against him and immediately felt more secure. The horse moved forward, and Colton guided them onto the snow-covered trail with easy confidence, leading Zara's mare behind them. They rode in silence for a while, making their way down the mountain pass. The sun climbed higher, and the day warmed slightly, though it was still well below freezing. Zara found herself studying the landscape with new appreciation. Yesterday, it had been a frozen hell bent on killing her. Today, it was starkly beautiful, the kind of wild, rugged country that made her understand why people came west seeking freedom and opportunity. "Tell me about this teaching position," Colton said eventually. "What made you want to come all the way to St. George?" Zara explained about her parents' death, her aunt's household, the letter that had offered her an escape. As she talked, she found herself sharing more than she had intended, telling him about her dreams of making a difference, of shaping young minds, of building a life that was truly her own. "My aunt said I was being foolish," Zara concluded. "She said a woman alone could not make it in a frontier town, that I should stay in Salt Lake City and accept the first marriage proposal that came along, even if it was from Mr. Henderson." "Who is Mr. Henderson?" "A widower with 5 children and breath that could peel paint," Zara said, making Colton laugh. "He is 63 years old and looking for a housekeeper who will not demand wages. My aunt thought it was a wonderful opportunity." "Your aunt sounds delightful," Colton said dryly. "She means well," Zara said, though even she did not sound convinced. "She took me in when I had nowhere else to go. I owe her for that." "You do not owe anyone your entire life," Colton said firmly. You have every right to choose your own path. Is that why you left Wyoming? To choose your own path, partly, Colton admitted. My father left the ranch to all three of us, but my uncle made it clear he expected to run things his way. He is a good man, but we butted heads constantly. I figured it was better to start fresh than to spend the next 20 years fighting about how to run cattle, so I took my inheritance money, said my goodbyes, and headed south. Best decision I ever made. You ever regret it, leaving your family? Sometimes, Colton said honestly. Especially around holidays. But I can always go back to visit, and I am building something that is mine. That matters to me. I suspect you understand that. I do, Zara said softly. They continued riding, the horse picking its way carefully through the snow. Colton pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the area. He had a gift for storytelling, painting vivid pictures with his words. Zara found herself laughing at his tales of cattle drives gone wrong, of horses with stubborn streaks, of the time he accidentally set his own hat on fire while trying to light a campfire in the wind. You are making that up, she accused. I swear it is true, Colton said, his voice full of mock offense. Ask anyone at Anderson's Creek. They will never let me forget it. I was the talk of the town for a month. As they talked, Zara became aware of a growing comfort between them. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by an easy camaraderie. She no longer felt self-conscious about leaning against him. It felt natural, right, as if they had known each other for years rather than hours. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the last of Colton's provisions. They were off the mountain pass now, descending into the red rock country that characterized southern Utah. The landscape was stark and strange, with twisted juniper trees and towering sandstone formations that glowed like fire in the afternoon sun. It is beautiful, Zara breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. It is, Colton agreed, but he was looking at her, not the landscape. Their eyes met, and Zara felt that spark of connection again, stronger this time. Colton took a step toward her, then seemed to catch himself. He looked away, clearing his throat. We should keep moving. We still have a long way to go. They rode through the afternoon, the sun slowly sinking toward the western horizon. Colton kept up a steady stream of conversation, but there was a new tension in his body that Zara could feel. His arms around her seemed more careful, more deliberate. Several times she caught him starting to say something, then stopping himself, finally, as the sun was painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Zara could not stand it anymore. What is wrong? She asked. You have been odd for hours. Colton was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled the horse to a stop and dismounted, helping Zara down. They stood facing each other in the fading light. Miss Vaughn, he began, then stopped. Zara, can I call you Zara? Yes, she whispered. Zara, I need to say something, and I am probably 10 kinds of fool for saying it, but if I do not, I will regret it for the rest of my life. He took a deep breath. I know we have only known each other for a day. I know this is crazy. But I cannot stop thinking about how it felt when I found you in the snow, how terrified I was that I would not be able to save you, how relieved I was when you opened your eyes. I have never felt anything like that before. Zara's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Colton, let me finish, he said, his honey-colored eyes intense. When I woke up this morning and saw you sleeping by the fire, I realized something. I do not want to take you to St. George and ride away. I do not want to say goodbye and wonder what might have been. I know it is fast. I know I am probably scaring you, but I have never been one to dance around the truth, so here it is. I am falling for you, Zara Vaughn, hard and fast and completely. The words hung in the air between them. Zara stared at him, her mind reeling. This was madness. They had met yesterday. She barely knew him, and yet everything he was saying resonated in her chest like a bell being struck. "You are right," she said finally. "This is crazy." Colton's face fell. "I understand, I should not have. But I am falling for you too," Zara continued, her voice stronger now. "I do not understand it. It makes no sense. But when I thought I was dying out there in the snow and then you appeared, it felt like fate. Like I was meant to find you or you were meant to find me. And today, riding with you, talking with you, I have felt more myself than I have in years." Colton's expression transformed, hope and joy lighting his features. "You mean that?" "Every word," Zara said. "But Colton, I have a job waiting for me in St. George. I have responsibilities. I cannot just—" "I am not asking you to give up anything," Colton said quickly. "I would never ask that. You fought too hard for your independence. I respect that. I am just asking if we can see where this goes. Court properly. I can ride to St. George every Sunday. It is not that far from my ranch. And maybe, if things work out, well, there is a schoolhouse in Anderson's Creek that has been without a teacher for 2 years. You want to court me?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very much so," Colton said. He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "If you will have me." Zara looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. This man had saved her life. He had treated her with respect and kindness. He had made her laugh and made her feel seen in a way she never had before. She thought about her plans, her carefully laid out future, and realized that all of it seemed pale and lifeless compared to the possibility standing in front of her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will court you, Colton Adams." The smile that broke across Colton's face was like the sun coming out. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Zara wrapped her arms around his waist, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the solid reality of his body against hers. "I promise I will do right by you," Colton murmured into her hair. "I will be patient. We will take this as slow or as fast as you want, but I will not let you regret this." "I already do not regret it," Zara said, tilting her face up to look at him. Colton's gaze dropped to her lips and Zara's breath caught. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her, wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that shocked her. But instead, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, lingering there for a long moment before pulling back. "We should keep riding," he said, his voice rough. "I want to get you to St. George before full dark." They mounted again, and this time when Zara leaned back against him, Colton's arms tightened around her in a brief embrace before taking up the reins again. They rode the last few miles in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. St. George appeared as the last light was fading from the sky, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures nestled in a valley surrounded by red rock cliffs. Smoke rose from chimneys and lamplight glowed in windows. To Zara, it looked like home. Colton guided them to a small boarding house on the main street. The proprietor, a stout woman named Mrs. Dalton, took one look at Zara's bedraggled appearance and immediately bustled her inside, clucking like a mother hen. Colton explained that he had found Miss Vaughn on the trail after the blizzard and escorted her to town for safety. Mrs. Dalton accepted this without question, too busy heating water for a bath and preparing a hot meal to interrogate them further. Before he left, Colton caught Zara's hand and pressed something into it. She looked down to find a small carved wooden horse, no bigger than her thumb, beautifully detailed. "I made it last winter," he said. "I want you to have it, something to remember me by until Sunday." "I could never forget you," Zara said. "Sunday," Colton repeated. "I will be here Sunday." "I will be waiting," Zara promised. He tipped his hat to her and strode out into the night, leaving Zara standing in the doorway of the boarding house with the wooden horse clutched in her hand and her heart pounding in her chest. The next few days passed in a blur. Zara met with the school board, a group of serious-faced men who interviewed her about her qualifications and expectations. She toured the schoolhouse, a single-room building with a pot-bellied stove and rows of rough-hewn benches. It was humble but clean, with large windows that let in plenty of light. She met some of her future students, children ranging from 6 to 14, their faces scrubbed and curious. She moved into a small room at the boarding house that would serve as her permanent residence. It was not much, just a bed, a washstand, and a small desk, but it was hers. Mrs. Dalton proved to be a font of information about the town, filling Zara in on all the local gossip and politics while serving enormous meals that Zara could barely finish. Through it all, Zara counted down the hours until Sunday. She found herself touching the little wooden horse constantly, running her fingers over its smooth surface, remembering the look in Colton's eyes when he had handed it to her. On Saturday night, she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had imagined the whole thing. Maybe Colton would not come. Maybe he had regretted his impulsive words as soon as he rode away. Maybe she had been a fool to believe that someone like him could be interested in someone like her. But Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, and at exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock on the boarding house door. Mrs. Dalton answered it, and Zara heard Colton's deep voice asking if Miss Vaughn was available to receive visitors. Zara flew down the stairs, nearly tripping over her skirts in her haste. Colton stood in the doorway, hat in hand, wearing clean clothes and with his hair neatly combed. His face lit up when he saw her. "Good morning, Miss Vaughn," he said formally, clearly aware of Mrs. Dalton hovering nearby. "I was wondering if you would care to take a walk with me." "I would like that very much, Mr. Adams," Zara replied, trying to match his formal tone but unable to keep the smile off her face. "Mrs. Dalton insisted on acting as chaperone, following at a discreet distance as Colton and Zara walked through the town. It was not ideal, but Zara found she did not care. Just being near Colton again made her feel alive in a way she had not felt all week. "How was your week?" Colton asked. "Did you settle in all right?" Zara told him about the school board, the schoolhouse, her room at the boarding house. "It is perfect," she concluded. "Or it would be, except I have been thinking about you every moment." "I have been thinking about you too," Colton admitted. "I drove my foreman half crazy this week, staring off into space when I should have been working. He threatened to throw a bucket of water on me if I did not snap out of it." Zara laughed. "I have been no better. Mrs. Dalton caught me stirring my coffee for 5 minutes straight this morning." They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open desert. In the distance, red rock formations rose against the brilliant blue sky. Colton took Zara's hand, glancing back to make sure Mrs. Dalton was not watching too closely. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what I said before, about courting. I want to do this right, Zara. I want to give you time to be sure, but I also want you to know that I am serious about this, about us." "I am serious too," Zara said. "I have never felt this way about anyone before." "Neither have I," Colton said. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his honey-colored eyes intense. "I know it is fast. I know people will say we are rushing, but sometimes you just know, do not you think? Sometimes you meet someone and everything just clicks into place." "Yes," Zara breathed. "That is exactly how I feel." They stood there, hands joined, staring at each other, the desert wind blowing around them. Behind them, Mrs. Dalton cleared her throat meaningfully, and they reluctantly began walking again. Over the next few months, Colton made good on his promise. Every Sunday, without fail, he rode to St. George to see Zara. They walked, they talked, they shared meals at the boarding house under Mrs. Dalton's watchful eye. Colton told her about his ranch, his dreams of building it into something substantial. Zara told him about her students, the challenges and joys of teaching. The town quickly accepted their courtship. Colton was well-liked and respected, known as a hard worker and an honest dealer. Several of the local ranchers told Zara she was lucky to have caught his eye, that Colton Adams was one of the good ones. In March, Colton invited Zara to visit his ranch. Mrs. Dalton agreed to accompany them as chaperone, though she complained about the long ride the entire way. The ranch was exactly as Colton had described it. Small but well-maintained, with a sturdy cabin, a barn, and corrals holding a mixed herd of cattle. The land itself was beautiful, nestled in a valley with a year-round creek running through it. Colton showed her everything with obvious pride, and Zara could see the potential in it. With hard work and time, this could become a successful operation. What do you think? Colton asked as they stood on a small rise overlooking the property. Mrs. Dalton had remained at the cabin, grateful for a chance to rest her feet. "I think it is wonderful," Zara said honestly. "You have built something impressive here, Colton." "I want to build more," Colton said. He took both her hands in his. "Zara, I know we have only been courting for a few months. I know this is fast. But I am 26 years old and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep thinking about you. You make me want to be better, work harder, build something lasting. I love you, Zara Vaughn. With everything I am, I love you." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Then marry me," Colton said, his voice urgent. "I am not asking you to give up teaching. We can figure that out. But marry me, be my wife. Build a life with me here." Zara's mind raced. This was everything she had never known she wanted. This man, this place, this life. But what about her independence? What about her teaching position? She had fought so hard for the right to make her own choices, to be her own person. As if reading her mind, Colton said, "I would never ask you to give up who you are. If you want to keep teaching, we will find a way. Maybe you can teach at Anderson's Creek. Maybe we can build a schoolhouse here on the ranch. I do not have all the answers, Zara, but I know we can figure it out together. As partners. As equals." Zara looked into his honey-colored eyes and saw nothing but honesty and love. This was not a man who would try to control her or diminish her. This was a man who wanted to build a life with her, not just expect her to fit into his. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Colton Adams." Colton whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and Zara felt it all the way to her toes. "We are getting married," Colton shouted to the sky, to the cattle, to anyone who would listen. She said yes. Mrs. Dalton appeared in the doorway of the cabin, a knowing smile on her face. "About time," she called. "I was beginning to think you would never ask." They were married in early May, in a small ceremony at the St. George Church. Zara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Dalton helped her sew, and Colton wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his eyes shining with happiness. The entire town turned out for the wedding, and afterward, there was a party that lasted well into the night. Colton's mother and sisters made the long journey from Wyoming to attend, and Zara immediately loved them. Emma and Margaret treated her like the sister they had never had. And Colton's mother, a kind woman with her son's warm eyes, hugged Zara tightly and told her she was exactly what Colton needed. Even Zara's aunt sent a letter, brief but not unkind, wishing her well. It was not much, but it was enough. The school board agreed to release Zara from her contract when she explained the situation, and it turned out that Anderson's Creek had indeed been searching for a teacher. The town was small, with only 15 school-age children, but they were eager to learn. The schoolhouse was a converted storage building, but with Colton's help, Zara transformed it into a proper classroom. She taught 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, leaving Fridays for ranch work and Sundays for rest. The first year of marriage was hard. They were both learning to live with another person, to compromise, to communicate. There were arguments about money, about how to run the ranch, about 1,000 small things. But they never went to bed angry, and they always talked things through. Slowly, they built a partnership that was stronger than either of them alone. The ranch grew. Colton expanded the herd and hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Zara's school gained a reputation for excellence, and families began moving to Anderson's Creek specifically so their children could attend. The town itself grew around the school, adding a general store, a blacksmith, and a small church. In the winter of 1886, 2 years after they met on the mountain pass, Zara discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, worried about how a baby would affect her teaching, her independence. But Colton held her and told her they would figure it out together, just like they figured out everything else. Their son was born in the summer of 1887, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Henry, after Colton's father. Zara took a few months off from teaching to recover and bond with the baby, and when she was ready to return to work, Colton's mother came to stay with them for 6 months to help with childcare. Eventually, they hired a young woman from town to look after Henry during school hours. Henry was followed by a daughter, Grace, 2 years later, and then another son, Thomas, 2 years after that. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, with rooms added as needed. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in southern Utah. Through it all, Colton and Zara's love deepened. They had their challenges, their hard times, their moments of frustration and doubt, but they faced everything together as partners and equals. Colton never asked Zara to give up teaching, and she never asked him to be anything other than who he was. They built a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection, and it showed in everything they did. On cold winter nights, they would sit by the fire after the children were asleep, and Colton would pull Zara close and remind her of the night they met. "I found you freezing on the mountain pass," he would say, "and I promised I would warm every part of you." "You have," Zara would reply, resting her head on his shoulder. "You kept your promise." As the years passed, they watched their children grow. Henry showed an aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere, learning the business from the ground up. Grace had her mother's love of learning and announced at age 12 that she intended to become a teacher too. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into scrapes, but with a good heart and a quick mind. In 1895, 11 years after that fateful day on the mountain pass, Colton and Zara sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the red rocks in shades of gold and crimson. The house had grown over the years, expanding from a simple cabin to a proper 2-story home with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. In the distance, they could see their cattle grazing peacefully in the valley. The sound of their children's laughter drifted from inside the house, where they were playing some complicated game of their own invention. "You ever regret it?" Colton asked, taking Zara's hand. "Giving up your position in St. George? Marrying a cowboy and settling on a ranch in the middle of nowhere?" Zara looked at him, at his face that had become so dear to her over the years. There were lines around his eyes now, and silver threads in his dark hair, but he was still the same man who had carried her through a blizzard and promised to keep her warm. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me everything I was looking for and so much more that I did not even know I needed. You gave me a home, a family, a partnership. You gave me love. How could I regret any of that?" "I am glad," Colton said, pulling her close, "because I wake up every morning still amazed that you said yes. That you took a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense." "You had plenty of sense," Zara protested. "You still do." "I had sense enough to not let you freeze to death on that mountain," Colton said with a grin. "That turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Inside, Grace called for her mother, needing help with something. In the barn, one of the ranch hands was singing a Spanish ballad, his voice carrying across the evening air. The smell of dinner cooking wafted from the kitchen window. This was their life now, built from that chance meeting on a frozen mountain pass. Built from a promise to keep each other warm in all the ways that mattered. "I love you," Zara said softly. "I love you too," Colton replied. "Always have, always will." The years continued to roll by, bringing both joys and sorrows. Colton's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1897, and they made the long journey to Wyoming for the funeral. Emma had married a banker and settled in Cheyenne, while Margaret had surprised everyone by becoming a journalist, working for a newspaper in Denver. The sisters stayed close despite the distances, writing letters faithfully and visiting when they could. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1900, Colton employed a dozen ranch hands and ran over 500 head of cattle. He had become a respected figure in the ranching community, known for his fair dealing and innovative practices. He was elected to the territorial legislature in 1899, though he only served one term, finding that he preferred the direct work of ranching to the indirect work of politics. Zara's school in Anderson's Creek became one of the finest in southern Utah. Several of her former students went on to attend university, something almost unheard of from such a small frontier town. She took immense pride in their accomplishments and kept in touch with many of them over the years. In 1902, when Utah finally achieved statehood after years of waiting, Zara was asked to give a speech at the celebration in Anderson's Creek about the importance of education in building a new state. She spoke eloquently about opportunity, about the power of knowledge to transform lives, and about how education was the key to ensuring that Utah would thrive in the new century. Henry married at 23, bringing a sweet-natured girl named Sarah to the ranch. They built a house on the far side of the property and began raising their own family. Grace fulfilled her dream of becoming a teacher, taking over Zara's school when Zara finally retired at age 55. Thomas, true to his restless nature, headed north to Montana to try his hand at horse ranching, though he came home often enough that they did not worry about him too much. As Colton and Zara grew older, they found that their love had evolved into something deeper and more enduring than the passionate spark of their early days. They knew each other's thoughts almost before they were spoken. They moved together with the ease of long practice, anticipating each other's needs, providing comfort and support without being asked. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Colton took Zara back to the mountain pass where they had met. It was summer this time, the trail clear and the weather perfect. They rode together on the same horse, just as they had that long-ago day, with Colton's arms around Zara and her leaning back against his chest. "I wanted to see it again," Colton explained. "The place where everything began." They found the old line shack, weathered now and falling into disrepair. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and the roof had partially caved in. But it was still standing, still marking the spot where two lives had intersected on a frozen night. "Hard to believe it has been 20 years, Zara said, looking at the small structure that had sheltered them from the storm. "Best 20 years of my life," Colton said. He dismounted and helped Zara down, then took her hands in his. "I meant what I said that night, you know. Every word of it." "About warming me?" Zara asked, smiling. "About warming you," Colton confirmed. "I promised I would warm every part of you, and I have spent the last 20 years trying to keep that promise. Not just your body, but your heart, your soul. I wanted to make sure you never felt cold or alone or unloved. I wanted to be your shelter from every storm." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "You have been all of that and more. You have been my partner, my best friend, my great love. You have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined that night when I thought I was going to die in the snow." "We gave each other a life," Colton corrected gently. "This was not just me rescuing you, Zara. You saved me too. I was alone out here, building a ranch but not really building a life. You gave me purpose, family, love. You made me complete." They stood there, holding hands in front of the old line shack, the place where their story had begun. Then Colton produced a blanket from his saddlebag and spread it on the ground in the shade of a juniper tree. They sat together, sharing the lunch Zara had packed, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch, about their hopes and dreams for the future. "Do you think we will grow old together?" Zara asked, resting her head on Colton's shoulder. "I am counting on it," Colton replied. "I want at least another 20 years with you, maybe 30 or 40 if we are lucky. I want to see Grace's children grow up and Henry's grandchildren. I want to watch Thomas finally settle down if he ever does. I want to sit on our porch when we are too old to do much else and hold your hand and remember all of this." "That sounds perfect," Zara said. They got their wish. Colton and Zara lived well into their 80s, a remarkable feat for the time. They saw the turn of the century, the arrival of automobiles, the first airplanes, the slow transformation of the West from frontier to established civilization. The ranch remained in the family, passed down to Henry and his children, a legacy built on hard work and love. In their final years, they did exactly what Colton had predicted. They sat on their porch, held hands, and remembered. They told their grandchildren and great-grandchildren the story of how they met, about the blizzard and the line shack and the promise to keep each other warm. The children listened with wide eyes, amazed that their proper grandparents had ever been young and adventurous. Colton passed away peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 1927, at the age of 87. Zara, devastated by the loss of her life partner, followed him just 3 months later. Some said she had died of a broken heart, unable to live without the man who had been her other half for more than 40 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large cottonwood tree they had planted together in their first year of marriage. The headstone was simple, bearing their names, dates, and a single line that Grace had chosen. "Together in the storm, together always." The ranch continued to thrive under Henry's management, and then under his sons and his sons after that. The school in Anderson's Creek remained open for decades, a testament to Zara's vision and dedication. The town itself grew into a prosperous community, though it never lost its small-town character. The old line shack on the mountain pass eventually collapsed completely, returning to the earth. But the story lived on, passed down through generations of the Adams family. It became a family legend, a romantic tale of fate and love and promises kept. Young couples in the family would visit the spot on the mountain pass, trying to imagine what it must have been like that long-ago night when a freezing woman and a determined cowboy found each other in a blizzard. The little wooden horse that Colton had carved for Zara was kept as a family treasure, displayed in a place of honor in the ranch house. It became a symbol of their love story, of that moment when Colton had promised to warm every part of Zara and had spent the rest of his life keeping that promise. Because that was what their story had really been about in the end. Not just the dramatic rescue in the blizzard, though that made for a good tale. Not just the whirlwind courtship and the marriage and the building of a successful ranch and a loving family, though all of those things mattered. At its heart, their story was about two people who found each other in the cold and chose to keep each other warm for the rest of their lives. It was about partnership and respect, and the kind of deep, abiding love that transcends circumstance and endures through all of life's storms. It was about a promise made on a frozen mountain pass and kept through 40 years of marriage. A promise that began with physical warmth but extended to include warmth of spirit, of heart, of soul. Colton had promised to warm every part of Zara, and he had. And in return, she had warmed every part of him. Together, they had built something that lasted not just their lifetimes, but for generations after. They had created a legacy of love that their descendants carried forward. A reminder that sometimes the most profound connections come from the most unexpected circumstances, and that a promise made with true intention can shape not just two lives, but an entire family's future. The story of Colton and Zara Adams became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that love, real love, is about showing up every day and keeping your promises. It is about being a shelter in the storm, a source of warmth in the cold, a steady presence through all of life's changes. It is about seeing someone at their most vulnerable and choosing to protect rather than exploit, to lift up rather than take advantage. It is about two people deciding to face the world together, as partners and equals, building a life that is richer and fuller than either could have created alone. And it all began with a simple promise on a frozen mountain pass. I will warm every part of you. A promise that Colton kept every day of his life, and that Zara returned in kind. A promise that became the foundation for everything else that followed, for all the years of joy and struggle, triumph and hardship, laughter and tears that make up a life fully lived, and a love fully realized. In the end, that is what made their story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. Not because it was perfect or without difficulty, but because it was real. Because it showed that true love is not just a feeling but a choice, made over and over again, day after day, year after year. A choice to keep each other warm in all the ways that matter, until the very end.